record this part of it. And yes, that comes up. So we're in business. All right. I wanted to do, I know you're saying, why? I wanted to do one more thing with ANOVA at this point, because sometimes there's a need. Well, let me use my newfound powers to use my little doc cam over here to talk about this just a touch. And get all this stuff off of here. Okay. Well, that's it. When you, as I mentioned earlier, you always have this notion that when you do an experiment or a study, you have independents that you're trying to figure out their impact on dependence. In other words, cause and effect. Or predictor and prediction. And so those are always what you're trying to do. And it's that, once again, it's that mental cognitive processing thing that we do. What is always happening, though, is that there are other influences happening that, for a lack of a better term, we call confounds or confounding variables. Now, all of these things are impacting this experiment or this study at the same time. You're only looking at a couple of things, because the only data you're collecting is data related to the independence or an independent, and data related to the dependence. You're not collecting any other data, typically. And so you have no way of gauging the impact that these confounded variables might have on what's going on. Now, one of the things that you can do with ANOVA is that you can, if you happen to have measures in place in your data set, you can remove the variability related to a confound. In other words, one of the big confounding variables that's always important in studies around school success, achievement, things like that, is gender. And another confound that's always around is one related to ethnicity. And so I always encourage people that when you're doing, studies that have, where there's some evidence that maybe there is a variation in outcomes based on gender or based on ethnicity, that maybe you want to take those into account. Maybe you want to deal with those. Maybe you want to say, okay, I'm going to take out the effects of gender, or I'm going to take out the effects of something else. Well, ANOVA allows you to use a process that's called covariance to take out the variability that's related to other variables that might be in the mix. And so let's go back to the ANOVA, to the data set. And for a second, over there. And we'll look at, we'll do the sort of the same experiment we started with before. The univariate. And instead of using gender as a factor, as a fixed factor, we'll use it as a covariate. Now, what you might want to know, what's the difference between random factors and covariates? Random factors are those that we assume would have no effect on anything. We have the data, it's in the data set, but we're not really interested in it, but we assume it has no effect. Covariates, we think, well, maybe there's some effect. It probably won't be a big effect, but there might be some effect related to that. And so we put gender in as a covariate. And so any effect on change 2 that's related to gender will be removed. That variation will be removed from the data analysis before we look at the data related to grouping. And so we're, in essence, we're taking out the effects of gender. Now, what that also does, though, is it takes out some variation. It takes out some of the overall variation. And so it makes the test a little bit less powerful. And once again, cuts down on some of the granularity. And so when we do that, what we see is that gender, which we use as a covariate, wasn't significant, but it did change the significance level of grouping.
You just need to switch screens.
Oh yeah, gotta do that. Sorry.
You need to switch screens.
Yeah, I got it. I'm sorry. I just I stopped thinking while I was in a little bit of a break. And so if you look at, let me get a little marker here so we can. Come down. When we look at the test down here, once again, here's gender. And even though it's not significant, it did have some small effect on variance, took out just a small smidge of variance, but it was enough variance that it took out to change the significance level on group. Now it's still significant. Instead of 0.001, it's 0.002. But there are cases in which you might have two significant variables, and if gender had been significant, it would have had more of an effect on grouping probably. But in this case, it had a very small effect, but it did change the significance level, because if you go back up to the earlier ones, you see that group was significant at 0.001. And so there are instances in which you would want to put a covariate or covariate out different variables just to see, you know, if they have an impact on the overall significance level of the main effect you're interested in. And so that's the, you know, that's the one of the advantages of ANOVA, is that you can do a little bit of that and take out, you know, stuff that you might be worried about, you know, the effects of things you might be worried about. You can't, or if you know that the groups aren't random, and you know that one of the differences is maybe, you know, what I've done before and some of the studies I've done is to take out the impact of teachers on certain things. You know, we'll have, I have a data set. In fact, we did this on a study a few years ago. We were looking at, who was, yeah, Ross was doing, in his dissertation, he was looking at the impact on, of some student demographics on teachers' merit bonus, and whether teachers that had ELL students or had, you know, a disparate number of ethnically diverse students, or had more males than females or whatever, if any of those demographic changes would have an impact on whether teachers, you know, got one of those bonuses or not that North Carolina was giving. And so we wanted to clear out some effects. And so we took out the effect of teacher gender, and we took out the effect of years of experience. And we left in how many ELLs they had, and how many categorical students they had, and, you know, things like that, and ethnicity. But we took out, you know, teachers' gender and teachers' years of experience, because those are not supposed to be factors in whether they get one of those merits or not. And so we took them out, and it did change the outcome somewhat. And, you know, we did discover what you expected to discover, that, you know, teachers that had more ELL kids, or teachers that had more ethnically diverse classrooms were less likely to get a bonus. And one thing that we found that was a little bit different was that teachers that had more categorical kids were more likely to get a bonus. And when you start to think about that, why was that? Because categorical kids were under a different growth model, and were so far below the class norm that, you know, they were able to show more growth than kids that were like just a normal kid in class. Now, I don't know whether teachers, when we left those things in there, you know, the categorical effect went away, and something else went away. But, you know, it was exactly what we expected, is that the, you know, the demographics of who teachers had in classes in the middle school, in the 3rd through 5th grades, I guess it was, in English and math, really had something to do with whether they got a bonus or not. And it wasn't purely just randomization of kids. It was something about the demographics also of those kids. So, you know, sometimes a covariance can be a useful tool to take out some effects of things that and it's the simplest tool to do that with. There's a couple of other tools. One we'll mention, and maybe I'll even show you a demo of it near the end of the course, about a month, that is better at doing it, but it's covariance is one way of doing it. So we okay so far? All right. I'm going to draw you my version of the flow chart so far, so you'll know where we're at. It's a little bit of a funky flow chart. And so be aware that it's a little different. And I'm going to have, well, I'll share it up first, maybe that would help. And I'm going to do I's for independent and D's for dependent. Now, we're assuming that we have, we're thinking about independent and dependent. That we have an experiment, it's either thinking about predictability or thinking about causation. If the independent variable, and we have two terms, we have categorical, and I'm going to call it interval instead of continuous. I'm going to call it interval. Otherwise, we'll have C and C. So let's just say, C is categorical, I is interval. So if we have an independent that's categorical, and we have a dependent that's continuous or interval, I'll call it int, INT. It depends upon how many groups we have. If we have one group, now we won't really show them as a group. We'll just say we'll know there's one group. And we have an interval over here, then this is going to be one sample T. Plus, we have to know some parameter. We have to know the population parameter. Now, if we have two groups, but we still have an interval scale over here, then we're doing independent T, for this interval scale over here. Okay. If we have more than two groups, then we're doing one-way ANOVA. on one interval outcome. So we're okay so far. If this becomes and I'm gonna come down from the one way here in just a second. Let's say we have a interval variable over here. And we still have our interval variable over here. Then this becomes correlation or regression. Or multiple regression. And I'm going to modify the one way and all that under here. If we have two categorical variables, for one outcome, then we're doing general linear model, ANOVA. And we'll just say that we're not going to get into nitpicking about covariance or things like that. But if we have more than one independent variable, then we need to have do something different. If we have a continuous variable for our independent and a continuous variable for our dependent, then we're going to do chi-square or logistic regression for multiple predictors. I know you can't read that. I'll give you a better version. If I have multiple predictors trying to predict one outcome, then I have either chi-square or logistic regression. And the other catch with logistic regression is it has to be the outcome variable, the dependent variable is binary. Not only is it categorical, but it's binary. Now that's a messy chart. And that's as far as I'm going to go. There are about 1,000 other things we could go on down. But I suspect most of you would never. Yeah.
Did you say that chi-square dependent variable has to be binary, or is that both chi-square?
No, just logistic regression.
Okay.
Yeah, the outcome variable has to be binary for logistic regression. For chi-square, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
It can have as many categories as it wants. Now, I'll try to give you a better version of this tomorrow, and I'll put it up on the As You Learn site, but I was trying to fit it within what I could display on this little camera.
I have another question.
Yeah.
So with the one-way ANOVA, if you have three groups and two of the three groups are categorical variables, you're going to use the general linear model.
Well, no, you have to have more than two independent variables. Did I say? Yeah, if you'll, down here under ANOVA, it says two continuous variables that are independent. I guess I should have put it back this way. Then that's general linear model. I'll clean this up. I'll make it look workable.
Okay, so you could have two groups, and then within each group, you're looking at two independent variables and the effect on the dependent variable.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the key is you have to have two independent variables you're looking at. And that's what you have to play with, is two independent variables. And so where we're trying to get to in here is at least through here. And then we'll spend some time, probably the last class session or so, of doing a couple of special setups and talking exclusively about what it is that you have in your proposal, which you'll have the outline and the rubric on tomorrow. And then once we know kind of what you're working with, I'll try to talk you through how you might, follow this rubric or follow this model and where you would end up at. Now, I would say in the 13 years I've been at App, and the maybe, I don't know, probably 70 or 75 dissertations I've been on, I've had two that were off this chart, and for on the quantitative side. And one of them was the one I was just telling you about earlier, the lady that works in the industrial setting. She used something that was really unique, let's put it that way. And it did have a history, but people stopped using it for some reason about 30 years ago. And I guess it was because people couldn't figure out what to make out of it. And I had used it slightly in one article that I was a part of 30 some years ago. So it was kind of like, okay, what is this thing she's doing? Oh, she's doing circular statistics. Let's figure out how to do I remember how to do that? And eventually I did. But it's all tied up into tangents and cotangents and sections of a circle and things like that, which allows you to get to a value that then you can analyze with just regular like t-tests or chi-squares or stuff like that. But it's getting from the raw stuff to the converted variables where all the sausage got messy. and she and I figured it out eventually, and we found one guy still alive that wrote a book about it that we could talk to, and that helped. Yeah, but yeah, it was interesting. Okay, that's as far as I am going to go today, because I think once I go back in and do a bit more of a video and clean you up a chart here, we might have something that might be of merit to you. And, I'll give that my best shot in the morning after my second cup and see what I can come up with. And it's supposed to rain tomorrow here, anyhow, like crazy, so that'll be fine. Means I won't be tempted by the 65 or 70 degrees outside. At least it'll be raining. So anyhow, any other questions? Any questions or comments in general or thoughts? Look for video tomorrow. Look for a rubric tomorrow. Just look for stuff tomorrow. Okay. Are we good? All right. You either share so I can shut this thing down. There will be this brief video and then another video that I'll cut for the first part of this, what we did earlier. And I'll just learn to check my equipment before I log in next time and make sure everything's working. But yeah, we'll get there, get you there. But you know, you have an appointment every Wednesday, except the 14th. Is the 14th a Wednesday? No, yeah.
Yes, it's a Wednesday.
Yeah, as I may have mentioned before, that's my 42nd wedding anniversary. So we always go dark and off the web that day. So, and we may leave, we may not. We just got a new puppy, so I don't know if we can take off now. So cute little 8-week-old, 5-pound miniature white miniature schnauzer. And she's a pistol, but she's also, it's been a year since we lost our last dog. So, you know, she's getting lots of attention right at the moment. So if you're going to spoil them, you got to spoil them early. And then just realize what you've done and live to it. So
She'll have to make an appearance at some point.
yeah, I know. Maybe she's fussing at her mom right now. So and if you've ever had schnauzers or, well, puppies, period, you know how they like to chew on anything, including you. And you know, Addie's A-D-D-I-E, Addie's having difficulty determining the difference between a chew stick and a finger or an arm so far. And so her mother's trying to break her of that habit. And I told her she'll be fine, don't worry. She'll get her regular teeth eventually and she'll quit doing so much, maybe. Yeah, for sure. Anyhow, okay, so enough about my puppy. But if there are no other questions or no other thoughts, look for the stuff to come up, and I will see y'all next week. But if you need anything between now and then, give me a yell, and I'll try to walk you through it. Okay. All right.
Have a good week.